Hi everyone, I'm thriller author j.f.penn, and today on Killer Thriller TV I'm here with L.J.Sellers. Welcome, LJ.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
It's great to have you on the show. So LJ is an award-winning journalist and the author of the best-selling Detective Jackson series, as well as some standalone thrillers, which we'll be talking about today. So LJ, start off by telling us a bit more about you and your writing background.
Well, I have a degree in journalism, so I've spent most of my life writing in one form or another. I loved my career as a journalist. I did a lot of work on magazines, but I also wrote for newspapers. And I think it really helped me develop self-discipline as a writer. When you're a journalist, you write regardless, whether you're inspired or not, whatever, you have a deadline, you have to write. So I don't get writer's block, I'm very dedicated and disciplined about sitting down and cranking out the words and just keep moving forward. So that was good training for writing fiction, but of course they're very different worlds. And I feel very privileged to have done both and to have transitioned finally from journalism to fiction because my journalism career, ended up being, well, as you know, the digital revolution had a huge impact on magazines and newspapers. And after several layoffs, in journalism, I said, okay, it's time to just focus on the fiction and make this, my life. And I've been fortunate enough to be able to do that.
No, fantastic. Now, I mean, you say that you've left that behind, but are many of your journalist experiences still sort of, does that come through in your fiction?
I think it does because it certainly affects my writing style. My writing style tends to be rather lean, and so there's that effect. And also in my research, I'm as a journalist, most of my information came from sources, and so that's when I do my research. That's how I approach it. I go to sources and I do interviews, and I get information directly from people who work in the field or who have experienced it, or can at least imagine what I'm imagining, and tell me how it exactly works and what sort of procedure is involved. So definitely my journalism influence, is a part of everything I do as a writer. It stays with
Mm.
me.
And then I've got to ask, who is the most interesting person you've interviewed for which book? What would be the coolest kind of research thing you've done?
Oh, oh, interesting. There's been several, but I guess talking to the medical examiner here in town was really fascinating, and he gave me a tour of the what they call Surgery 10 at the hospital, which is really the morgue, and that was fascinating to see where the table and where they. I didn't actually get to witness an autopsy, but to see that room and to have him kind of walk me through the process for what they do when they bring in a body and who all is there, and I was surprised to discover that there's actually quite a few people in this tiny little room, watching the autopsy, and he was fascinating, and he had a lot of stories to tell about bodies and what kind of condition they were in. So and I love that stuff. It's gruesome for most people, but for me it was fascinating. So definitely, and he's actually retired now, but we became kind of good friends over the years, and so he's someone I can email at any time with questions, and he's
Mm.
become a really excellent resource for me.
Oh, fantastic. So tell us about Crimes of Memory coming out later this year.
Oh, I'm excited for it. It is Detective Jackson #8. My beta readers or early readers tell me it's the best book I've written, which is always good to hear,
Yeah.
because there is that pressure with every story that it's better than the next or better than the last. So um, in this book, Jackson is investigating the death of a homeless ex-con, which is kind of challenging for him because it's not a victim that he can necessarily relate to or feel a lot of compassion for, but
Mm.
so it's challenging for him to feel dedicated to give it his best investigative effort, regardless of who this person is. And at the same time, there is Agent River, who's an FBI agent that I introduced in Rules of Crime, and she comes back in this story, and she is handling an investigation into a local eco-terrorist group, which is something that is very real to Eugene because we had such a group operating here, a couple, say, a decade or so ago. So she's investigating that, and then, of course, the stories begin to overlap, and they come together in what may be my most explosive and shocking ending yet. So I'm excited for readers to see this one, and I'd love to see their feedback for it.
Oh, fantastic. So, and tell us a bit more about Detective Jackson, because you've written, so many books in the series. Are you Detective Jackson, or how much of you is in him?
Interesting. Very little of me is actually in Detective Jackson. I've interviewed many homicide detectives, but the first couple that I interviewed kind of formed the basis for who he was. And then, of course, I added an element of my husband to him
Mm-hmm.
because I think my husband's a terrific person and he's a very, very compassionate human being. And I wanted Jackson to have that element of compassion because you don't see that a lot in a lot of detective characters. They have tendency to be kind of hard-boiled and cynical, and a lot of times they've been driven to drink or drug use or whatever. And I didn't want him to be like that. I wanted him to be a very compassionate and very much a family man. So he's a composite of a couple of detectives and my husband.
Mm. And I mean, many of our characters are flawed. Does he have a flaw?
I think his biggest flaw is that he's a workaholic. When he first takes on a case, he tends to work around the clock, and shuffle his daughter off to his her aunt, to watch her for a few days while he pushes for the case. So his biggest thing is and that's what we all face, the juggling of family versus career. So that's his biggest issue, and he tends to err on the side of career when he's first investigating a case, and then he tries to make up for it later, which we all do. But that is his biggest flaw, is that he is a workaholic, and he has a tendency to carry a lot of guilt, for things. And maybe that is the one, in one way he is like me, is he does tend to feel responsible, for things, for everything. He takes on a lot of responsibility.
Yeah,
That may
absolutely.
not be his.
Mm. And what about what are the themes and sort of personal obsessions that come through in your work? What do you keep revisiting over and over again?
Oh, that's a good question. I do. All of my books have social issues and or themes that come up, but I actually don't revisit them. I try to be different for each book. Each book tries to be, is a different kind of crime, different kind of characters, different structure, and I do try to bring different themes into each story. And I think that keeps it interesting for readers. For example, in Passions of the Dead, the issue that I was dealing with there was the thing that keeps happening where an entire family is murdered, and that's such a bizarre thing to me, and I was very curious about why that happens, and so I wanted to explore that. So that was the social issue, but the underlying theme there was the recession and how hard it hit so many families, especially families living on the edge, and it was an opportunity to write a family story from each character and how the recession had affected them personally. And I know all those people in that book. They're very real to me. And so that was a very personal book. But that's just an example of how I use a social issue and a theme. Or, for example, in Rules of Crime, my last book, which came out in March, the social issue that I dealt with was hazing and how it can be very disgusting and very violent. And even, we think of hazing oftentimes as a male thing, but it's not. Young women participate in it too. So I wanted to explore that and maybe expose it for what it is. But the underlying theme, the personal issue in that story, was the loss of a parent and how it affects, especially as a young person. Young people who lose a parent or early in life, can be very, very traumatized by that, and it can really affect and alter the course of their life. So that was the underlying theme that I explored there. So I do a lot of different things, in terms of themes. But I try not to revisit too many of them because I want to keep it interesting for my readers and not just keep writing about my same old bullshit.
Well, I think even just the fact that you choose social themes is carries through. So you've got a series character, and how do you decide when you're writing the book? Do you come up with a theme first, or do you start with how do you start the idea for a new book?
I typically start with a crime that I've read about and become something that's stuck in my brain, that I can't stop thinking about because it's really weird or intriguing, or I keep thinking, I want to solve that, and if the police don't solve it, I have to solve it in my head somehow. So there's typically a crime, and then there's a social issue typically that I feel passionately about at the time, or that seems connected to that particular crime. There seems like there's an underlying social issue that's driving it. So I take those two things and I just keep bouncing them off of each other until a plot starts to emerge. And then I just keep working it until I have a plot. But then as I'm writing, I usually discover that a theme is emerging. There's the characters share similar things that are going on in their personal lives. They'll have similar things. And then once I kind of identify that theme, then I make the most of it. I make a point of incorporating it and bringing it out and making it clear.
And what about what is your writing life like? Because I'm looking behind you. You've got some lovely skylights. There's a lovely bit, sort of airy room there. What's your study like, and how does your writing life work?
Actually, I'm not in my office at the moment because I'm upstairs because they're down there working in my bathroom downstairs because I had some, a leakage or whatever, which just is a reminder to readers that, yes, writers are human beings and we have the same stuff happening. Our bathrooms develop leaks and we have to have stuff worked on the house, and all of that gets in the way, of writing. So we just have to, I just have to keep working around it. But anyway, my office downstairs has skylights because daylight is very important to me. I really need a lot of natural light because I'm really an outdoor person. If I were not a writer, I would spend my life outside, which is a funny thing, So,
Yeah.
So I do have to have a lot of light in my office. And I try, when I'm writing a story, I try to write the first draft in a very quick way. I set a word count like 2,500 words a day, and I try to write that 5 days a week, and with a goal of finishing a rough draft in a couple of months, getting the first draft down. And then after that, it's a process of revisions. So the schedule changes and it becomes a little more flexible. But that was what works for me is writing a story, is getting it down as quickly as possible. So I don't revise while I'm going along. I get the story down as quickly as possible because that way it comes together better for me, I've discovered. So and then my goal, I've basically been writing 2 to 2.5 books a year for the last 3 or 4 years. And I keep thinking I can do better than that, and I can't. I just can't. I don't know. I know other writers.
That's pretty hardcore.
I know. Well, I know a lot of people that are cranking out 3 books and 4 books, 5 books a year. I don't know how they do it. I don't.
Yeah.
But I have a very large extended family, and I have a lot of young people in my life. Nieces and granddaughter, and and people that depend on me, and so I have a big family life, and it's important to me, and I'm always going to maintain that. So I try to, every day is a balance between the writing and the marketing and the family. So
yeah, absolutely.
Those are my focuses.
And you mentioned there that you're an outdoor person. So what do you do for fun? What is the stuff you do outdoors?
Well, when the weather's like this, and July in Oregon is perfect, I have to tell you, it is. It's glorious. But I love to ride my bike, so I go out biking every day, and I ride year round. Even in the winter, I'm out biking every day because I just need to get out there. But I love to bike, and I hike, and I have done. I like to do adrenaline. Adrenaline-seeking things. So one of the things I do as a cyclist, I ride up to the really tall hills so I can go scream down the other side as fast as I can because I love that. So I've done. I've been skydiving, I've been up in a hot air balloon, I've been parasailing, so I really seek out those adrenaline adventures.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Any interesting scars then we should know about?
Oh, I am covered with scars, I've played a lot of sports. Over the years, I've played volleyball and softball, and I was thinking, I have a lot of permanent injuries that I can go through, and each one is related to sports. Like I broke my collarbone playing tennis. I ruptured my Achilles tendon playing basketball with my children. Tore a hamstring playing softball. Tore a meniscus playing volleyball. So I know I don't play sports anymore. I guess I play too hard. It's not that I'm even competitive. I'm just very energetic, and I just get into things. So I don't play competitive sports anymore. In fact, I work out in the pool a lot because my husband says it's the only place that I'm safe. It's in the water. I can't hurt myself. So
that's brilliant. Well, do you scuba dive?
I haven't been scuba diving yet. I have been snorkeling a few times. Scuba diving, though, now you just added it to my list of things I got to try because I'm like that. I'm like, that's fun. I'll have to do that.
It's awesome. Well, I keep, I'm interviewing thriller writers, and a lot of people scuba dive. I'm like, we should have a thriller writers scuba dive holiday. It'd be awesome.
Oh. That would be fun, especially if it involved like going to Australia or someplace I've never been. We've got to do it.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a plot in there somewhere.
Sure.
But yeah. So you said you're in Eugene, Oregon. You love the outdoors. Do you bring that sense of place to your books?
To a certain extent, yes. And I've had readers tell me, of course, local readers love it that I write about Eugene, and I've had other readers in other parts of the world tell me that they really get a sense of Eugene, and so I do try to include it, but I don't really focus on it. And I wouldn't say, I know some people say in some stories the place becomes a character, and I don't think Eugene really does in that sense, and I'm okay with that. my stories are really plot driven and character driven, and I try to keep the pace moving along, and so I don't spend a lot of time developing, scenarios. But I do try to give readers the flavor of Eugene, by setting certain scenes in things that are unique to Eugene, or including things like if I see something in Eugene that makes me think only in Eugene, I'll try to include that in a story so my readers get a sense of it. Like, Jackson will see somebody, a naked man bicycling through downtown or something, so, something, I let those things, so I give readers little glimpses of what it's really like to live here, and so they can see some of the fun and goofy stuff that happens in Eugene.
Yeah. That's cool. And also your bio said that you do stand-up comedy.
I do occasionally. I know that was the strangest thing to get into, but I was writing scripts at the time, and I was writing some comedy scripts, and I was getting I was frustrated with the comedy part of it, and thought I really need to take a comedy writing class, because I know there are specific things that you can and should learn in order to do comedy appropriately on paper. It's very challenging.
Yeah.
Believe me, it's very challenging. So I took a comedy writing class, and the point of the class, was that you would write stand-up material. So over the course of a couple months, I wrote a stand-up routine and developed it and practiced it. And the graduation from the class was to perform that stand-up for a crowd, and it was a big crowd. And we performed in a venue downtown, which was kind of a bar theater type situation. And I did well, and I had fun, and I thought, and so now it's just something I do every once in a while when I have an opportunity to. Like the Planned Parenthood had a benefit, and they invited me to come, do a couple minutes of stand up. So yeah, and I did some stand up at a Boucher Con at a talent contest. That was really brave and really stupid, but I did. So yeah, I do it every once in a while, and it's fun, and it's good. It's good for me to get back to the humor, because it's important, to the balance, the gritty crime. It's really important to have a balance in your life, and I enjoy the humor, and I love watching comedy movies, and so it's fun for me to be reminded that life can be funny, and that I can be funny, and that it's okay to sometimes, be funny and silly, and explore that other side.
Which is fascinating, because I've read some of your books, and there isn't much funny stuff in them.
No. I like I said, I wrote the 3 comedy screenplays, and I was able to do that, but I have not really found a way to really inject humor into the stories that I write. They're just really gritty, realistic crime stories, and they're just really, and there is, occasionally there's humorous lines, because people who work in this field do, occasionally use their gallows humor or whatever, to relieve themselves of that constant tension. But it's really not a funny job, being a homicide detective. It's really not. So, and I'm okay with that. I don't feel compelled to. I think someday it might be fun to try a humorous series, maybe, to try my hand at that, just to see if I can do it. And I may do that someday, but mixing the two in the Jackson series has just never felt right to me, so I don't really do it. And I hope, I don't want people to be disappointed when they come to my series thinking, oh, she's a stand-up, comedian. Yeah. Maybe her work will be funny, because it's not.
No, but I thought that was just an interesting point, because I think sometimes readers think authors sit around just being kind of miserable and, getting all really dark. Because my books also have murders in, and, aren't funny at all. And, but we're not like that, are we? Clearly.
No, and in fact, I think most of the authors I meet are really upbeat people. They're happy, they're upbeat, and funny. There's a lot of funny authors out there. When I attend these conferences, I'm amazed at how people keep me laughing all the time. So I think by naturally most of us, at least the ones that get out there at these conferences, are more upbeat and fun people to be around.
So talking about the authors, who are your favorite writers to read? What do you read for pleasure?
Oh, there's really so many, but over the years, the ones that I've stuck with the most consistently are writers in my genre. I love police procedurals. That's why I write them. Yeah. I write stories that I like to read. So Michael Connelly, John Sanford, and one of my all-time favorite authors over the years has been Lawrence Sanders. I know a lot of young people probably have never heard of him, but he's terrific, and he's so versatile. He's written, police procedurals. He writes thrillers. He writes from both genders in an amazing way, and he also wrote an amazing futuristic thriller called The Tomorrow File, which is one of my favorite books ever. So he's my favorite author, and I would encourage readers who haven't tried him to give him a try, even though his books are dated now, because he's been dead for a while. But
Mm.
oh, and he writes humors. He also writes the Archie McNally series, which are really lighthearted and kind of funny at times. So I admire him. I wish I had his versatility.
Well, you're not dead yet.
That's right. That's right. And I'm still evolving. And yeah,
Exactly.
I may write a little bit of everything before it's over.
Exactly, I think that too. I mean, I always think writing's such a good, a good thing. I saw Ruth Rendell interviewed last weekend. She's 86. She's a baroness. She's been writing for 60 years.
Wow.
I know. I mean, we've got time, which is exciting.
It is. It is.
Mm.
And I don't see myself retiring. This isn't something you retire from, I mean, if I'm not actively working on a story, I find myself getting kind of cranky,
Yeah.
and then I realize, oh, it's because I'm not writing, and it's time to get back to work, and then everything seems okay again. As long as I have a story in progress, I'm happy. So I don't imagine myself ever not writing.
No, exactly. Me too. Right. So where can people find you and your books online?
The main place would be my website, L.J.Sellers.com. Very easy to find. I'm also, I'm on Goodreads per profile, so all my books are listed there. Of course, I'm on Facebook and Twitter. And let's see. And I've got, I belong to a couple of other I have several Facebook pages, but I belong to another group called Killer Thrillers, as you know, which is where this came from. So I'm pretty easy to find. You just Google L.J. Sellers and 10 pages of links will pop up. So I'm pretty present
And
online.
all the books are on Amazon.
They are indeed. In fact, all of them up to this point are Thomas and Mercer releases. So yes, my books are exclusive to Amazon.
Fantastic. Well, thanks for your time, LJ. That was brilliant.
Oh, it was fun. Thank you so much.